Once again, over a year has passed since my last update. I figured now's a great time to reflect and share what I've accomplished in 2023. If you're new here, my name's Andrew and I've been trying to make a JRPG in my spare time for like 20 years. 2023 had some setbacks. At the start of the year, I was impacted by the tech layoffs and spent the first 5 months of 2023 finding a new job. I thought I'd get more development time in, but the pressures of securing reliable income constantly loomed over me. Game development for the foreseeable continues to be a side project. I did what I could though. The new gig is good and here we are in a new year. Let's recap some development. This past year I focused primarily on content for the second of the game's 5 planned acts. Act 2 adds 4 new dungeons centered around a new hub town. All mainline cutscenes, dungeon maps, and mechanics are in, and yikes, there are just too many small mechanics here and there that start to conflict despite my best efforts to maintain some semblance and control over my scope. For example, having characters follow you around with a basic pathfinding algorithm is great, so you have swimming and levers to raise and lower water levels and all sorts of interactions. Then these things start to get complicated and buggy, to be honest, quite quickly. But these systems are all coming together and make multiplayer quite enjoyable. On the character customization side, I've added a passive ability system. This is inspired by Final Fantasy IX's ability system with a few tweaks. Passives have a set of triggers, such as dealing damage or using a specific elemental attack, my party member is defeated, a battle begins, etc. And then an outcome as a result of those triggers occurs, usually a buff or a stat boost at the moment. You have a set number of points to equip passives, but in another twist in the Final Fantasy IX abilities formula, you unlock more slots by exploring and interacting with the environment. This is really a dumping ground for lots of world building and character development. The goal here is to add a bit of depth to character building with fun ways to experiment and get creative without cramming it in the player's face. One recurring piece of feedback I received was that combat felt boring at times. Sue had a distinct lack of resources, no SP, few items. This was more out of hesitancy to implement new systems without giving it proper thought, but I'm finally moving towards with a few combat tweaks. First, I'm experimenting with SP as a character stat. This is not a currency for abilities, but instead something more akin to hunger. It determines how much HP you recover after battle and slowly depletes after every enemy encounter. It's replenished most easily by drinking water. But water of course requires a container to store it in, so you can't simply purchase 99 bottles of water and be done with it. Instead, as another resource of sorts, team will collect empty bottles. Bottles may be filled with various liquids like potions, ingredients, and of course water. In an effort to be more environmentally friendly, the party saves their empty bottles after consuming water to refill later. That's right, this is straight out of early Zelda, but the benefits this system provides solve many of the traditional problems I have with items in RPGs. You hoard them, never use them, and they just clutter your inventory. By providing meaningful choices to the player when shopping, I hope to combat item hoarding. For example, I have 5 bottles. Do I bring 5 waters? Or maybe I bring 3 waters and 2 monster energy drinks that don't replenish as much SP but maybe boost my movement speed temporarily. As an added bonus, the system slots right into the game's trading mechanics. You trade empty bottles for filled bottles. Using a water bottle is just removing that consumable then giving the player back an empty bottle. Players also have 4 additional secondary slots in combat, accessed by holding the spacebar or trigger on a controller. These will be a variety of equipable combat tricks, items, and most interestingly, combos. Combos are special attacks players can use to create any combination of learned skills. For instance, you might have an attack that deals frost damage and freezes an enemy briefly. Another character has an attack that launches a fireball. Because that enemy is now frozen, the fireball does extra damage. This is a lot of new mechanics for an otherwise simple battle system. I might tweak the rate at which I introduce them. I might also drop some of these if they aren't fun or needlessly complex. The goal here is to provide more long-term dungeon-scale resource management to the game and drip-feed new mechanics to make combat more interesting and engaging. I've hired a few artists to help making the game, mostly because if I try to do all this myself, who knows when I'll finish. This is part, wow, making a JRPG solo is hard, and part I actually have to be very deliberate with what little time I have for development. I get 1 to 2 hours a night after my daughter goes to bed if I'm lucky. Spriting over a sketch just to get character portraits that look barely passable take me a full week's focused time. It's just not sustainable, and I believe in the vision of the game enough to get help. Puking Rabbit has sprited monsters for all of Act 2. These are far more expressive and polished than I've ever been able to do. I Am Sako is sketching and spriting in-game portraits. Their attention to detail from sketch through to pixeling and anti-aliasing the portraits is inspiring. 1-800 Anime School, aka K-Furisu, returned to do my game's title screen. You may remember her art from the RPG Maker 2003 version of the game. I feel like the new title screen symbolizes a slow maturity and natural progression of ourselves as artists. The way I was doing sprite sheets was not at all scalable. I've leveraged Asprite's JSON exporter, written a parser, and then re-implemented all of character animations. Now a character sprite doesn't need an entire texture page just to itself. This is relatively minor from a player's perspective, but man, I just wanted to show off what a good texture packaging is capable of. Sue will target Switch at launch. I pitched it to Nintendo and I'm an approved developer. From the start of development, I've taken a controller-first approach to input, and couch co-op nature of the console makes it a perfect fit. The game is totally playable with a single Joy-Con too, so you can play with a friend without an additional controller. Act 2 is basically playable from start to finish now. I've done 3 solid playthroughs and caught most of the hard crashes. Story-wise, this bit of content is particularly difficult for me to write. Certain scenes aren't quite as impactful as I like, and the character-to-character dialogue just didn't write itself like the Act 1s did. There's also a lot of holes for side content. An optional dungeon in an abandoned church, hot springs side quests, and so on. It's always a balancing act between polishing existing content and charging ahead with the story and writing. But this is a massive amount of material. My last playthrough clocked in at a bit over 6 hours, so Act 2 roughly triples the amount of available content. I've updated the public demo with a cleaned up Act 1. If you'd like to support me and get access to the newer stuff while supporting my dreams of finishing this thing before I retire, please consider subscribing to the Valkyrie Games Discord server or donating on Ko-fi. For 2024, I'll continue to slowly and diligently chip away at game content. Features and polish will come, but the core pieces are already here. The biggest challenge for me at this point is writing and implementing a cohesive, meaningful story, turning ideas and plot point wish lists into a concrete narrative. I'll continue working on that and hopefully not get too sidetracked by shiny mechanics or minigames. Occasionally someone will contact me and share just how much they've enjoyed Starless Umbra after discovering it on Opera GX. Other times someone will remind me when this project was called Dragonheart. It's hard to put into words how much this means to me. So if you enjoy this kind of content, please do the thing and like, subscribe, share with your friends, etc. Let me know what you liked or what you'd like to see more of. Thanks for watching, and I wish you a wonderful 2024.